Hi students, how are you? So in this video lecture, we are going to cover lecture 6. Um, it's going to be a little bit shorter compared to the other lectures, but basically this lecture talks about international trade and how international trade has an impact on the overall economy of the world, as well as how it benefits different countries, because trade has a lot of benefits. So we're going to look into that in details. So question is, why trade with other countries? If we have resources and if we can produce goods and services within our own country, why do we trade with other countries? So there are three basic reasons for why countries engage in international trade. First one is there are some things that one country cannot produce at all or cannot produce in sufficient quantity. So they have to get those items from other countries. So, for instance, in the US, the Americans may want a particular good that the US cannot produce in sufficient quantity or is unable to produce the good. So, in order to meet the demand of the US citizens, they will buy these goods from the international countries and bring it home so that people can enjoy the benefits of these goods. An example would be like in the US, we do not produce sufficient amount of bananas, rubber, coffee, tea, and cocoa. And all these things are not produced in sufficient quantity in the US, but everyone basically has tea and coffee in the morning. They have banana and they need rubber for commercial purposes. So, what the US as a country does is they engage in trade with other countries who produce these goods, such as bananas, tea, coffee, and rubber, and import these goods into the US so the people of the US can enjoy these goods and services. So that's one of the main reasons. The country cannot produce sufficient amount of goods that people want in the country, so they import those goods for the people. The second reason why countries engage in international trade is basically when countries engage in trade, they they get the benefits of specialization. Okay, so what does specialization means? Specialization means that when a country is performing, when a country is basically performing, or when a country is undertaking an activity. So again, the trade leads to specialization, which has its own benefits. So if a country engages in a production of a particular type of good, they keep on doing it and they become specialized in it. So what does that mean? So basically, let's say US is specialized in producing, let's say, cotton. Okay, they have been producing cotton for a long period of time, and as a result, they became an expert in producing this good. So this is an example of specialization. When a country becomes an expert in producing a good, they are said to enjoy the benefits of specialization. So, what are the benefits of specialization? Specialization basically allows countries to be more efficient, which in turns basically means they can produce more of the good or service. As there is more production, there will be more income to the people. So, people will have more income to buy goods and services, and the country will have more GDP. So this results in increased standard of living of the country. So the second reason why we engage in trade, or why countries engage in trade, is because they want to enjoy the benefits of specialization. When a country becomes specialization in the production of goods, they can increase the amount of production or good, and as a result, the income coming to the different people goes up. And as income goes up, they can buy more goods and services, and the overall standard of living of the country goes up. Finally, the third reason why countries engage in trade is because it gives consumer more choices. Again, when consumers are most happy and when consumer satisfaction is maximized, that is when we achieve the most efficiency in the economy, right? So, with trade, consumers have choices of goods that are produced domestically as well as goods that are produced outside. So they have a wide variety of selection to choose from, and basically meet their demand, which is a good thing, right? For instance, in the US, due to trade, we have option to buy cars produced in the US. Like, let's say you are trying to buy a car, you have so many options. You have domestic produced cars in the US, such as Ford. Then you also have international produced cars, such as Toyota and Honda, which are produced in Japan. Then you have Kia, which are produced in South Korea. Then you have Mercedes and BMW, those are produced in Europe. So you're getting choices from all around the world, and hence your satisfaction from these choices will basically be maximum, because you have so many choices, so you can make the best decision out of that. So these are the three reasons why countries engage in trade. Now, when we say trade, we mostly mean imports and exports, right? So what are imports? Imports are when the country buys goods and services produced by another country. So let's say when the US is buying coffee or tea from England or from India, then they are basically importing tea from India to the United States. So the tea was produced in India, and US did not produce the tea, so they are buying the tea from from that country, and that is called import. Okay. American imports are made in the foreign country and bought by Americans. We import cars, autos, consumer electronics, clothes, and other items. Okay. Now the other type of trade is called exports. Exports are basically when, let's say, the US produces goods domestically, and these goods or services are bought by foreign countries. So when the US is selling a good or service produced in the United States to some other country, let's say in Europe, India, or Asia or Australia, then that is called exports. American exports are made in the America and bought out by foreigners. Okay, some of the items that U.S. exports are aircraft, software, telecommunication products, IT, and financial services. America also exports entertainment such as movies and TV shows. Hollywood movies are watched everywhere in the world, whether in Europe, Australia, or Asia. We export that and earn the income from that. So it's very important we understand imports and exports, because these are the basis of trade. So imports and exports ultimately lead us to the concept of trade deficit and trade surplus. Trade deficit happens when we are importing more than our exports. Okay, so when imports are greater than exports of a country, then the country is said to have a trade deficit. Basically, we are buying more from the foreign country than we are selling to the foreign country. So the amount of purchase from foreign country is greater than the amount of selling to the foreign country. When that happens, we experience trade deficits. Imports are greater than exports. Trade surplus is the opposite, when exports are greater than imports. So when we are selling more goods to foreign countries versus selling less, or versus purchasing less from foreign countries. Okay, so that when that happens, it's trade surplus. Again, exports are greater than imports, and balanced trade happens when basically exports are equal to the imports. Okay, so trade deficit is actually kind of a good thing, because it increases our standard of living. Again, because of trade deficit, when we import more, consumers have more choices, and basically their standard of living increases. This also means for the same amount of effort and consumption of resources, we can satisfy more of our own wants and needs and demand. If we buy more from foreigners, then buy from us, they end up with more dollar left over. Those dollar are put into the bank. So basically, the dollars with the people who get the money. It's the businesses that are getting dollar, because we are buying more goods from the foreigners. So foreigners put these dollars into the bank, and these banks loan these dollars out to businesses who then wants to buy U.S. assets. So these dollars are coming back to the U.S. as investments, which is a good thing. So trade deficit gets financed when foreign government, business firms, and individuals buy assets in the US, right? So we might have a trade deficits, but when foreign government and foreign businesses make investments in the US, the money is coming back to the US. As a result, the amount of dollars leaving the US equals the number of dollars returning to the US. So trade deficit is kind of a good thing. Now, international trade in a free market, open market economy, we assume that when there is free international trade going on between the countries, there will be very little government intervention or involvement. Government will not try to come into the market and hinder the trade between the countries, or try to slow down the trade between the countries, because that is ultimately going to cause inefficiency. In a free market economy, the less the government is involved, the better it is, because it is more efficient. Okay, assume American firms produce a product for domestic sale in the US market. Now they open up to trade, and firms from European Union is also selling the same product in the US. So they bring this product to the US market at a lower cost of production and delivery, and therefore they can offer it at a lower price to the Americans. So this is good for the American people in general, right? In the US, if they are produced domestically and they are not specialized in that good, that the price of that good may be very expensive. Whereas in Europe, they may produce that good at a lower cost, and they can sell these goods at a much lower price in the US. So consumers will have the option to buy these goods at a lower price, which is good for the consumer. So this causes supply curve, the overall supply curve of the good, to shift right for the product, right? Because now US domestic market is selling the price product or the good, and at the same time the rest of the world, or let's say Europe, is also selling the good in the US. So we have more supply of the good in the market, and price goes down. As supply increases, the price in the American market falls down, and basically that is good for the consumers, right? Because at lower prices, they will buy more goods and services. However, at lower prices, the losers will be some American firms or some domestic firms who are not efficient. This is because some of the American firms may not be specialized, or they may not be good at producing that good. So they may incur high cost. And that is why they are charging higher prices in the market. But because of trade, now these products are available at a cheaper price. So people are going to buy these from the European companies that are offering at a cheaper price. So what will happen is some of these domestic companies who are charging higher prices and inefficient will make losses now, because people are not buying from them. And as a result, they will lay off workers and may shut down operations. But it is only for the farms or businesses that are inefficient and have high costs. Farms that are able to keep their costs under control and are able to compete with the European companies will still survive in the market and will still be able to enjoy um, revenue and profit. But only the farms with high costs will experience losses. They will lay off some American people, and at the end of the day, they will may shut down. So I want to show this through a graph, like when we are only producing domestically and when the US economy opens up to trade. Okay, so let's say right now in the beginning, in the beginning, we have the supply and demand curve. This is the demand for the product in the US. This is quantity, this is price. Let's say this is coffee, okay, and this is the supply in the US. So now only this is domestic, okay? Coffee is only produced by domestic farms in the US, and this is the supply, this is the equilibrium, so this is the price, and this is the equilibrium quantity, right? Because where demand and supply intersect, that is the equilibrium price. So right now this is the equilibrium price. Now let's say the US opens up to trade, and now in the market we have coffee suppliers that are coffee producers within the country, as well as foreign coffee producers or foreign coffee sellers, right? So what happens is, because now demand will stay the same, but what happens is supply will increase, because trade is increases the supply, so the supply curve will shift to the right. So US plus world, that's the supply curve. So look what's happening to the price. This was your price, this was your quantity. Now, this was your old equilibrium before trade. Now, because of trade, the new equilibrium, the supply curve has shifted. So the new equilibrium is going down meaning the price is falling, but quantity is going up, which is an overall good thing, right? We have more supply, we have more demand, price is lower. So it is good for both the producers because they are able to sell more. It is good for the consumers because they are able to buy more at a lower prices. So both the consumer side and the supplier side are happy because the price has gone down, quantity is more in the output, so standard of living will go up and GDP will also go up. Now, the only loser in this case scenario would be the domestic American firms that have high costs and that are inefficient. So those firms will not be able to compete with the world, and as a result, they will lay off some workers and they'll shut down or cut down their production. So that is so clearly you can see that it is a benefit. It's actually helping consumers to get goods at lower prices. Suppliers also get more, they can sell more quantity, and at the same time, inefficient firms are getting out of the industry, which is a good thing, right? Because they cause inefficiency in the market. So overall, trade is a very good thing, and it has very good advantage. Moving on to the next slide, and the opposite case scenario, we're going to look at the opposite case scenario, and that is also true. For instance, assume a market for a good or product in the European Union. And it is an American firm that can bring the product into the European market at a lower cost. For instance, let's say aircraft, yeah? European Union or the countries in the Europe, they produce airplanes or aircrafts at a higher cost. So the prices for aircrafts are much higher in the Europe. But in the US, they can produce aircrafts at a much cheaper price, so at a much cheaper cost, so they can offer aircrafts at cheaper prices in the European market. So exactly the same results will happen. Supply curve of aircrafts will shift to the right in the EU market, and as a result, the price of airplanes will fall. Right now, the buyers of airplanes will have more options at lower prices, which is good for the consumers. And at the same time, you firms that are highly inefficient and have high costs, they will be forced to shut down and they will also lay off some of their European workers, which is kind of a good thing because that industry or that company is inefficient or is causing inefficiency. Therefore, we can say international trade destroys jobs in the high cost, uncompetitive industries. So it will destroy some jobs, but it will do that in some uncompetitive industries. However, because of trade, and because sales will go up because there's more supply and more demand because of low prices, sales will go up. It will create more jobs, right? Because now there's trade, there's delivery involved, so there will be other transportation industry will be involved, so there will be more jobs opening up in other industries. So while we will be losing some inefficient jobs in uncompetitive industries, but on the other hand, trade will create jobs in other industries such as transportation industries, delivery of goods industries, or even in those own industries, the production will go up. So it will create more jobs. As a result, it creates more jobs, then it eliminates in both countries. So if you balance it out, the benefit is greater than the cost. So who wins and who loses in international trade? When countries engage in free trade, the winners are basically the consumers because they get a lot of choices and they pay low prices. They get choices of goods that are produced domestically as well as goods that are produced in foreign countries. And then because the supply is high, they are able to get these goods at a lower price. Okay, losers are high cost inefficient domestic producers, right? Because they are producing these goods at high cost, they're unable to compete with the foreign producers, and as a result they lay off workers and they shut down their production. There are also other benefits. Domestic producers that are efficient, they become more efficient because now they have competition from foreign countries, so that helps the market as well. Domestic producers serve a large market and they get benefit of being a larger producer and acquire economies of scale. So now they have a larger market to sell their product because of the trade, and as a result, they achieve economies of scale. So exports are therefore not bad for America. Imports are also not bad for America. So in totality, trade helps overall picture. It helps the US, both imports and exports. So the basis of trade is absolute advantage and comparative advantage. This is very important because we need to understand the basic concept why countries engage in trade. We know the fundamental reasons, but there are some basis, or in terms of mathematics, you will see it makes sense for both parties when two countries engage in trade. And those concepts are based on absolute advantage and comparative advantage. So the formal definition of absolute advantage is if one country can produce a good using fewer resources, or if a country can produce a product or good in larger quantities than another country with the same amount of resources, then the first country is said to have absolute advantage. So let's say we have the same amount of resources for US and Canada, and now both these countries produce apples. Now, if with the same amount of resources, if US can produce more apples than Canada, then US is said to have absolute advantage on apples because with the same amount of resources, they're more efficient and they can produce more apples compared to Canada. Okay. However, what will happen if one country has absolute advantage on both products? Remember, on the very beginning of this course, we discussed that resources are fixed and they are limited in quantity, so we cannot produce or we cannot get everything that we want and we have to make choices. Since resources are fixed and limited in quantity, a country cannot produce two goods at the same time with the resources. So one, they have to choose which country will produce one good and the other country will produce another country, another good, right? So this eventually leads to the concept of comparative advantage. Because at times when a country has absolute advantage on two or more products, then we have to rely on the concept of comparative advantage, because then the absolute advantage model does not work because resources are fixed in quantity. So we cannot, the country cannot produce two goods at the same time because of limited resources. Now, comparative advantage means a country is going to produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost compared to the other country. Okay, because resources are limited in quantity, because resources are limited in quantity, even if a country has absolute advantage in two products, they cannot produce two products at the same time. So, a country that has lower opportunity cost will produce a good based on comparative advantage. We'll do some examples to go over this concept so it's more clear to you how we apply these models in real world situations. So this is when comparative advantage using opportunity cost information comes into play. We examine the opportunity cost, so we calculate the opportunity cost to produce each of the product by the country. So let's say there are two or three different products. So we're going to calculate the opportunity cost for these three products for each country and then compare it with one another. So a country that has the lowest opportunity cost on a product will basically produce that good, and the other countries will buy those goods or trade those goods from the first country. Okay, so the country will thus specialize in the good or product with the lowest opportunity cost, and the other countries will take up other products in which they may have lower opportunity costs. Okay, so our country becomes customers of others who have a comparative advantage in producing other goods. Also, other countries become customers of our country for products that we have lower opportunity costs in. Okay, this is the reason why many of the clothes are produced in China, because wages are lower in China, so it is less expensive to produce clothes there compared to the cost of making clothes in the US, because they have comparative advantage, so their opportunity cost is low. So China produces clothes and we just basically import those clothes from China because it's much cheaper than making it domestically. So we're going to do an example now to understand absolute advantage and comparative advantage model. So let's do the example. So let's say we are given with this information in the example. There are two countries that we're going to look into, USA and Mexico. So these are the two countries we are going to look into. We're going to assume that USA and Mexico, they have the same amount of resources in both these countries. So land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur, they are the same amount. This is an assumption we are making that these two countries have the same amount of resources. Now, if we look at it, USA can, with that same amount of resources, they can either produce 10 apples or 20 berries. Okay. On the other hand, Mexico can produce 25 apples with the same amount of resources or 75 berries, right? So this is given to you. Now we're going to come to the questions. So first question is based on absolute advantage model, who has absolute advantage in the good apples? So we are asking which country has absolute advantage and why. So the reason is if you look at now we're going to look into apple, forget about berries. So if you look into apples with the same amount of resources, USA can produce 10 apples, whereas Mexico can produce 25 apples. So definitely Mexico has absolute advantage in apples because they can produce more with the same amount of resources. They produce more. 25 is greater than 10. Okay, now we move on to the second question. Who has absolute advantage in berries? The second product. Who has absolute advantage in berries? Again, we look into the table. Now we look into berries. USA with the same amount of resources can produce 20 berries, whereas Mexico with the same amount of resources can produce 75 berries. Okay, so again 75 is greater than 20, so Mexico again has absolute advantage on berries. It produces more berries with the same amount of resources than US because 75 is greater than 20. Okay, now remember, going back to the slide, if you see at the bottom it says because resources are fixed or limited in quantity, even if a country has absolute advantage on two products, they cannot produce two products at the same time. So that is the problem with absolute advantage. In this case, if you see, Mexico has absolute advantage on both apples and berries, right? That's what we found out. But resources are limited or fixed. So they cannot produce both apples or berries at the same time. They have to make a choice. It's or. With the resources, they can either produce 25 apples or 75 berries. So now, because the absolute advantage model did not work, as Mexico has absolute advantage on both the products, we're going to have to shift to the comparative advantage model, where we look into the opportunity cost for each of the countries and for each product. Okay, so the next question I have is who has comparative advantage to produce berries, or who has comparative advantage for berries? So we are going to look into berries first, okay, and then we're going to first find out the opportunity cost of berries for USA and then for Mexico. Then we're going to compare the opportunity cost. Whoever has the lower opportunity cost is basically going to produce berries, okay. So let's first look at USA. Okay, so if they decide to produce 20 berries, what are they giving up? Look at here, they can either produce 20 berries or 10 apples. Because they're going to produce 20 berries, they're going to give up 10 apples, right? So, in order to produce one berry, they're going to give up half an apple, which is basically 10 divided by 20. We end up with half apple. So, the opportunity cost to produce one berry in the US is half apple. That is the opportunity cost for US. Now we look at Mexico. Same way. To produce 75 berries, Mexico is giving up 25 apples. So to produce one berry, they are giving up 25 by 75, which is equals to 1/3 apple. So half is zero point 0.5, one third is 0.33. So this is smaller. So Mexico has comparative advantage on berries. So basically from this example, we can tell Mexico will produce berries. Okay, because based on the comparative advantage model, Mexico advantage has a lower opportunity cost, so they will produce berries. Now moving on, the next question I have is, who has comparative advantage for apples? We look at the comparative advantage for berries, but now we want to know who has comparative advantage for apples. So again, we're going to do the same thing for USA and for Mexico. So let's say for USA, to produce 10 apples, they give up 20 berries. So to produce one apple, they will give up two berries, basically 20 divided by 10. So that is their opportunity cost. Okay. On the other hand, let's look at Mexico. To produce 25 apples, they give up 75 berries. So to produce one apple, they give up 75 divided by 25, which is 3 berries. So in this case, if you see, US has lower opportunity cost, 2 berries, whereas the opportunity cost for Mexico to produce apple is 3 berries. So the opportunity cost to produce berries is low, to produce apples is lower for US. So USA has comparative advantage on apples. So they will be the one producing apples. Okay. Moving on, the next question I have is, based on this, who should specialize in apples? Which countries should specialize in apples and which countries should specialize in berries? It's very easy to understand. USA has comparative advantage in apples, so they will specialize in apples. And then Mexico has comparative advantage on berries because the opportunity cost is lower, one third. So they will produce berries and they will become specialized in the production of berries. Okay, so that is this answer. Then we end up with the final question: what will be the trading price? So we now know that USA will produce apples in house and they will import berries from Mexico. Okay, because it will benefit them because they cannot use resources to produce more than apples. So in-house or domestically they will produce apples and they will trade berries from Mexico so that they can meet the demand of the people who want berries. On the other hand, Mexico will produce berries domestically and they will trade or buy apples from USA or import apples from USA to meet the demand of the people. Now, this trade benefits both USA and Mexico because they're saving cost in both the cases. Okay, so now if we look, what will be the trading price in terms of berries for apples that US will sell, right? So we know US has competitive advantage on apples, so they will be producing it domestically and sell it to Mexico or export apples to Mexico, right? So what will be the price that they will charge to Mexico? So we know the opportunity cost of apple is 2 berries. And for Mexico, the opportunity cost for apple is 3 berries. So the price will be something, or the price should be something that will benefit both US or Mexico. So US will charge a price between 2 to 3 berries, right? So let's say maybe 2.5. That's also a right answer. If they charge, let's say they assume in the market for one apple, they're going to charge 2.5 berries. If that happens, it benefits USA because their cost is 2 berries, but they're selling it for 2.5 berries. So they're making that extra profit by selling it to Mexico 2.5, right? So they're making that extra profit. So it helps USA. This trade helps USA by exporting apples to Mexico. Now, does that help Mexico? Let's look at that. If Mexico produces apples in-house, they have to give up 3 berries. Whereas if they are buying it from the US, they are only paying 2.5 berries. So again, they are saving cost here. It makes sense for them. If they were producing domestically, it would be 3 berries, whereas now they are buying it for 2.5 berries. So say they are saving some cost and they are also benefited. So both US and Mexico are benefited from trade. Now let's say if the US charges for one apple, they charge 4 berries in the market. Then in this case, if this is the case, then Mexico will not buy it because they can produce in-house, which is going to cost them less rather than 4 berries. Okay, so see, this is the basic concept of trade. It is benefiting both the countries, right? And we have more choices. One country gets specialized and they can import the other product from the other country and meet the demand of the people. And it also benefits business wise both the countries. One country is saving cost by paying less, the other country is making money by making some profit by charging a little bit higher than their opportunity cost. So trade is a benefit for all over the world. Okay, so this is very important. You'll probably have an example like this in the exam as well as a problem like this in the homework. So make sure you understand this problem. So moving on, as we said, in a free international trade market, you would want the government to have very little interference or involvement. But in reality, we know government is very much involved in the international trade, right? We also know that because of international trade, domestic high cost producers or the inefficient industry or the producers in the inefficient industries are forced to lay off workers and cut down production, right? This may mean a high unemployment rate in a certain area. So that causes fear for certain members of the Congress because people who are running for office, whether it's a House office, a member of Congress, or a Senate, or whether it's presidential, that area, the people from that area fears that they will lose the election due to high unemployment rates and due to low, production from the factories. So they say they are protecting the American consumer, but in reality, they are protecting high cost, unproductive producers. So they try to defend that international trade is not good for the country because they want to win the elections. And in response, they come up with various trade restrictions with different countries that limit free international trade. If there is no restrictions, there's no trade restrictions, then it's going to create the most efficient market with international trade. But government, in because they fear they may lose some of their votes and some of the patriotic people may not support them, that's when they start defending domestic production, high cost domestic production, and protest against international trade, and they impose policies such as trade restrictions that would limit international trade. Trade restrictions are generally on imported goods. So we are going to look at into the different trade restrictions that the government can impose on imports. So again, when US is buying foreign goods, government can place different trade restrictions on it so that the number of imports go down and people buy more goods from the domestic goods and services. So trade restrictions are actually protection of domestic producers from foreign competition. Again, the reason why politicians and the government impose trade restriction is they are basically trying to protect the domestic producers, whether they're inefficient or high cost, that's not the matter to them. But they're basically justifying that they are protecting domestic producers from foreign competition. Okay, and it can come in many forms. So the different types of trade restrictions are: number one is a protective tariff. A protective tariff is basically a tax on imports. When you have a tax of imports, the cost of the import goes up, and therefore we have higher prices of the imports in the market. So now consumers will have to pay higher prices, so they may even decide to buy the domestic product versus the international product because the price is higher because of the tariff. Another type of trade restriction is called the quota. Quota is basically an absolute limit on the amount of imports of a particular product from a particular country. So let's say the government imposes a quota of on coffee for 100 boxes of coffee from England. Okay, so what does that mean? That means in a year, US can only import 100 boxes of coffee from England. They cannot, even if there is more demand, they cannot import more than 100 boxes of coffee from England. Okay, so supply is restricted, and for that, the supply does not go up as much, so price will go up. Now, there are also other techniques to limit trade. Some of these includes creating bureaucratic red tapes. Government creates bureaucratic red tapes, like, they can require importers to have licensing requirements before they can sell foreign products in the domestic market, or they can require that the products need to meet certain criteria or specifications before they can be sold in the US market. So these eventually increase the cost and will increase the price and limit trade. Government can also come up with voluntary restraint agreement. One country agrees to voluntarily limit their exports to another country. They do this in fear that the country will impose a quota on their products. So these are different ways that the countries can limit trade or can implement trade restrictions. Now, when government implement trade restrictions, what are the justifications they use? So they have to justify to the people of the country why they are limiting trade, right? So here are the most common justifications they use when they are trying to limit trade. The first one is military self-sufficiency, right? So politicians say that we do not want to get dependent on one country on trade because it can be a problem if there is if a war breaks out between the country, then the economy of the country will be doomed, right? For instance, politician states that we do not want to rely heavily on oil from Iran because we do not have a good relationship with Iran, and if there is a war that may break out between US and Iran, then we will have troubles getting oil from that country. So that's one justification. Second justification is increased domestic employment. Again, they're saying they're protecting the domestic industries from foreign competition, so domestic employees are not laid off. But in reality, international trade creates job in other industries. Yeah, it may eliminate some jobs in inefficient industries, but it is creating more jobs in transportation delivery industry. Okay. The third is infant industry. That's another justification used by politicians. They say that they want to protect newly formed industries from foreign competition so that they can grow big and become established in the market. The reality is these industries are protected for years. They are not infant industries. They are protected for years and years without facing any competition, which also causes inefficiency in the market. The fourth reason for trade restriction is dumping. Dumping is defined as selling goods in the foreign market at a price below the cost of production. It is illegal in the US. Okay, so sometimes politicians will say, oh, hey, Japan is dumping goods in the US, meaning they are selling their goods lower than the cost of production in the US market to make more money or to capture market. But again, this is not true. Okay, this does not make sense because just think about it. This would allow American consumers benefit from the dumping with lower prices, and second, Japanese automakers are beating the American automakers without dumping. Also, think about it. Do we really believe the government of China or Japan would overtax its citizens and give money to their auto industry so they can sell their products in the US industry? Of course, it doesn't make sense. Okay, again, these are justifications they use, but they are not true. Finally, the last justification used for international trade restrictions are cheap foreign labor. They say that if we engage in trade with other countries whose wages are lower, such as China or India, then the wages of our country, the wages of the labor of our country will also eventually fall to the same amount as the other country. Again, this is not true. Wages are determined based on productivity and your talents and your skills. In the US, most people are involved in the service industry. They're engineers, they're doctors, they're software developers. So they get paid based on their skills and productivity, not based on comparison to wages to other countries. Okay, so this is also not true, but these are some of the justifications that politicians use in implementing trade restrictions. I think we discussed who are the winners and losers of international restriction of international trade. The losers are the foreign countries. The losers are the consumers because they get high prices. They get limited choices. Foreign producers are also the losers because they have a limited market now. The winners are the inefficient domestic producers because now they don't face much competition and they can operate in an inefficient manner and sell in the market at high prices. Okay, it can also impact the efficient domestic producers because now there's not much competition, so they do not have the incentive to become more efficient. Another term that is used in trade is called outsourcing. Outsourcing is basically what it means is we hire an outsider or an outside country to take over a particular function of the business. Okay. So let's say Samsung is a big mobile phone company or cell phone company, right? But they will hire India as an or they will outsource their call center job to India, which means they are hiring India to perform this particular function of call center, and that is known as outsourcing. Okay, the outsider or the outside country usually specializes in that function and can do it better and more efficiently than our own country. Okay, again, for instance, an American cell phone company may create design, engineering, and assembly the phone in the US, and they can market the product all around the world. However, they can push the call center or the manufacturing to other countries where it is more cheaper. In that way, the business can also save money, and it also costs less to do that in other countries. Outsourcing is also often known as offshoring. Outsourcing, of course, can cause loss of jobs in the US because we are designating a particular function of the business to a different country, so people in that department are losing job. But it can, at the same time, it can also help to create jobs. For instance, if the US company manufactures the cell phones in India where it is cheaper to manufacture and assemble, then what will happen is they will be able to sell more cell phones in the US industry the US economy at lower prices. So which means if sales is more, they have to produce more, so they will hire more people for advertising, marketing, and as well as they'll hire more people for accounting. So it is going to create jobs in other departments. Of course, there's going to be some loss of jobs in manufacturing industry, but it's going to create jobs in other industries such as marketing, sales, design, and engineering. Okay. Now, there's also a term called insourcing. Insourcing is when a company is another company, basically when a company in another company when a country in another company when a company in another country, sorry, so this should be when a company in another country engages a US company to do certain functions. So let's say India, they manufacture cell phones, but now they are hiring a US company to perform the marketing for them. So it's the other way around, opposite of outsourcing, and it creates job for the US economy because now the India is employing the marketing department, so jobs are created for the US economy. So some of the work that is in sources here are computer and engineer services, financial services, and some other services in the US. Since we are talking about trade, we also have to talk a little bit about the foreign exchange market because different countries have different currencies and the values vary, right? Like the price of a product maybe $1, maybe €1 versus $2, right? So we have to take that into account. The exchange rate has to be taken into account because different countries have different conversion rates and different currencies. For instance, $1 is equals to 1.3 Canadian dollars, and 1 Canadian dollar is equals to 0.70 or 76 cents in USA. Okay, now there are two types of exchange rates: floating and fixed exchange rate. In the US, we have a floating exchange rate where the exchange rate fluctuates on an everyday basis, okay, based on demand and supply. Okay. um Under the other one is the fixed exchange rate. For instance, China has fixed exchange rate. Here the government plays an important role. The government of the country picks a major country's currency. Let's say Saudi Arabia has a fixed exchange rate system, and they select US as a major country whose currency is very popular, and they fix the value of the Saudi riyals against the dollar. Okay, so that is what, and that when they do transactions between different countries, this rate will be fixed. It's not going to vary from day to day depending on demand and supply, but it's fixed by the government. Okay, for instance, Saudi Arabia fixes its currency to the dollar. So one Saudi Arabian real is basically 0.26 cents. Okay. So conversely, one US dollar is equals to 3.759 Saudi Arabian real. This is fixed by the government, and any transaction between US and Saudi Arabia will have this currency conversion rate. Okay. Now, if there are excess reals existing in the foreign exchange market, the Saudi government will agree to buy up the excess real with their respective foreign currency. Or if there is excess dollar in the foreign exchange market, then the Saudi agree to buy up the excess dollar. That way, they balance in the fixed exchange rate system. Now, government can also change this rate. Government has the power to change this conversion rate under the fixed exchange rate system. If there is extra, if the supply is excess of a currency, the foreign exchange market, in the foreign exchange market, and they depleted their foreign exchange reserves, they can formally devalue the currency and support the new rate. And on the other hand, if there is excess demand for the currency, and they can formally revalue their currency to have a higher rate. So depending on demand and supply, they can revalue or devalue the currency against the common dollar amount. Okay. Now, most countries have floating exchange rates, such as the US. The exchange rate of the currencies is determined by the supply and demand in the foreign exchange market, just like any other products. It's a free market. Whatever the demand and supply is for dollar will determine its value. Whatever the demand and supply is for euro, it will determine its value. And the exchange rate fluctuates on a daily basis. So if supply of currency decreases or the demand for the currency increases, then the price will go up in the market. Okay. On There will be appreciation of the currency. On the other hand, if supply of the currency increases or demand for the currency decreases, then the price of the currency will go down, and we will see depreciation of the currency. Okay, so this is very important. We need to understand floating exchange rate versus fixed exchange rate. You also have to understand the statement called balance of payments. So the government prepares for most countries' government prepares the balance of payment statement. The balance of payment statement is basically a statement for over a year that lists or that consists of three accounts: current account, capital account, and reserve account. So the current account includes all types of trade, international trade, income coming from investments, foreign investments, unilateral transfers, or foreign aid that comes to other countries. Okay. The largest part is due to trade and tourism. For example, an American firm buys euros to pay for German machinery, and Italian farmer buys dollars to pay for American equipment. All these are accounted for under the current account. The second one is called the capital account. Capital account includes investments made in other countries. So if USA is making investments in Europe, or USA is making investment in Middle East, then these are recorded under the capital account because these are investments. So it documents the purchase and the sale of the assets. If they are selling those assets in the foreign market, that's also recorded on the capital account. Okay. Finally, we have the reserve account. The reserve account is a reserve of foreign currencies used to take some of the volatility out of the exchange rate. If there is too much volatility in the current exchange rates, we have a reserve account of dollars so that we have some reserves out there, so we can basically, in case of shortage of supply, we can provide it, or if there's too much supply, we can just take out some of the dollar and put it into the reserve. Okay, so that is listed in the reserve account. So trade deficit is very important. During recession, you will see trade deficit is going down. Remember, in the beginning of this video, we said trade deficit is actually a good thing because it improves the standard of living, and it increases trade. Well, during recession, you will see trade deficit is going down or even reaching zero. Okay. So there is an inverse relationship between how the economy is operating and trade deficit. If the economy is doing well, trade deficit will go up. If economy is going towards recession, trade deficit will go down. So that's the end of this lecture. I'm going to stop here. Next video lecture will cover lecture 7, but that is all for today. Thank you very much for your time.